The following story contains descriptions of violence against women and children, murder and drowning. Listener discretion is advised. This is No Tears for Black Girls. I'm your host, Samantha Paul.
No tears for black girls when they disappear. No tears for black girls like they were never here. But we remember, we'll speak their names.
The Price of Survival, When a Sugar Daddy's Money Turned to Murder. Prologue, 3 bodies, 3 locations, 1 devil's work. The morning of September 13th, 2025, dawned gray and cold over Reading, Pennsylvania, a city that had seen better days. Once a thriving railroad hub, Reading now carried the weight of economic decline in its bones. Abandoned factories stood like tombstones along the Schuylkill River. Neighborhoods that once hummed with working-class prosperity now struggled with poverty rates that ranked among the highest in the nation. It was in this landscape of desperation that 3 lives would be stolen. 3 bodies would be discovered in 3 separate locations. And one family's American dream would become an American nightmare. At 6:30 that Friday morning, Reading police officers responding to a call at Bear Park along River Road made a discovery that would launch one of the most horrific murder investigations Berks County District Attorney John Adams had ever seen. A body, male, Hispanic, shot execution style in the back of the head. The victim was 33-year-old Junior Cabrera Colon, a Dominican immigrant trying to build a life in America. But Junior's murder was just the beginning. Because somewhere in Reading, his wife and baby son were already dead, their bodies hidden, waiting to be found. This was the devil's work, a family member would later say. This is not normal. District Attorney Adams, a seasoned prosecutor who had seen countless horrors, would stand before cameras days later with tears threatening to spill from his eyes. "Just makes me want to cry," he would say. "I don't think that any of us can imagine the tragedy that took place here and how horrific this crime was." This is the story of how financial desperation, male entitlement, jealousy, and possessiveness created a perfect storm that destroyed an entire family. This is the story of what happens when a woman becomes property in a man's mind, when her refusal becomes his justification for murder. This is the story of Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, who made a deal with the devil to survive and paid for it with her life, her husband's life, and the life of her baby boy. Part 1. The Victims, Dreams Deferred. Geraldina, the woman who tried to have it all. Geraldina Peguero Mancebo was 31 years old, though some reports listed her as 32. In the Dominican community of Reading, she was known as a woman who worked hard, loved fiercely, and carried the weight of 2 worlds on her shoulders. She had the kind of beauty that turned heads, dark eyes that held both warmth and wariness, a smile that could light up a room when she chose to share it. But beneath that exterior was a woman navigating an impossible situation, trying to keep her family afloat in a country that promised opportunity but delivered struggle. Geraldina and Junior had 3 other children, ages 8, 13, and somewhere in between, who lived back in the Dominican Republic, attending school, being raised by family. It's a story as old as immigration itself. Parents sacrificing proximity to their children, working in America to send money home, hoping to build something better for the next generation. But building something better required money, and money was always the problem. Reading, Pennsylvania wasn't supposed to be this hard. The city of 95,000 sat about 60 miles northwest of Philadelphia, close enough to feel the pull of urban opportunity, far enough to maintain its own struggling identity. For Dominican immigrants like Geraldina and Junior, Reading represented a foothold in America, a place where you could find work, even if that work barely paid enough to survive. Geraldina had worked at a warehouse. It was there she met Jose Luis Rodriguez. Junior, the husband who never knew. Junior Cabrera Colon was 33 years old when he died. He was Geraldina's husband, the father of her children, the man she came home to at night. He was trying to make it in America the honest way, working, providing, building. Friends and family described him as a good man, a family man, someone who loved his wife and children, who worked hard, who didn't deserve what happened to him. But Junior didn't know everything about his wife's life. He didn't know about the apartment. He didn't know about the money. He didn't know that his wife had made a bargain to keep their family afloat, a bargain that would cost him everything. On September 11th, 2025, Junior met someone he thought was a friend, someone Geraldina knew, someone who had been helping them. That someone put a gun to the back of Junior's head and pulled the trigger. Jeyden, the baby who drowned in mud. Jeyden Jr. Peguero was 1 year old, just a baby. He had his whole life ahead of him, first words, first steps, first days of school. All the milestones that make a life. He had his mother's eyes, his father's smile. He was the youngest of 4 children, the baby of the family, the one who would grow up American while his siblings grew up Dominican. On September 12th, 2025, Jeyden was in his mother's arms when she was shot in the back of the head. The bullet that killed Geraldina didn't touch him. He survived that moment. But he wouldn't survive what came next. The autopsy would reveal mud in his lungs. Mud from the shallow pond where he was thrown, face down, while still alive. Mud that filled his tiny airways as he struggled, as he drowned, as his 1-year-old brain tried to understand why the world had suddenly become water and darkness and suffocation. District Attorney John Adams, who had prosecuted countless murders, would later say that this detail, the mud in the baby's lungs, was what made him want to cry. Because it meant Jeyden was alive when he hit the water. It meant he felt everything. It meant his last moments were terror and confusion, and the desperate instinctive fight for air that every drowning victim experiences. Jeyden Jr. Peguero drowned in a shallow pond in Ontolani Township while his killer walked away. He was 1 year old. Part 2. The Predator, when money becomes control. Jose Luis Rodriguez, the Sugar Daddy. Jose Luis Rodriguez was 61 years old, 30 years older than Geraldina, old enough to be her father. He had worked at the same warehouse where Geraldina worked. That's where they met. That's where the arrangement began. The details of their relationship remain murky. Investigators described it as personal, the nature unclear. But the evidence paints a picture that's all too familiar. An older man with money, a younger woman in desperate need, and a transaction that masqueraded as generosity, but was really about power. Rodriguez rented an apartment for Geraldina. He gave her money. He financially supported her, as police reports would later state. In the language of the streets, in the vernacular of transactional relationships, Jose Luis Rodriguez was Geraldina's sugar daddy. But what did Geraldina give in return? The investigation doesn't explicitly say, but the implications hang heavy in the air. Rodriguez believed he owned her. He believed his money bought him rights to her life, her choices, her future. And when Geraldina refused to leave her husband, when she made it clear that Rodriguez's money didn't buy him ownership of her heart, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one would. The psychology of possession. This is where we need to talk about what happens when men view women as property, when financial support becomes a chain, when generosity is really just control wearing a prettier mask. Rodriguez wasn't helping Geraldina out of kindness. He was investing in what he believed was his future with her. Every dollar he spent, every bill he paid, every month of rent on that apartment, these weren't gifts. They were down payments on a woman he believed he was purchasing. This is the dark underbelly of sugar daddy culture that nobody wants to talk about. We see the Instagram posts, the designer bags, the luxury vacations. We see young women living lives they couldn't otherwise afford, and we judge them. We call them gold diggers, opportunists, women who are asking for it. But we don't talk about the men. We don't talk about the power imbalance. We don't talk about what happens when a woman in desperate circumstances makes a deal with a man who has resources, and then tries to set boundaries, tries to say this far and no further, tries to maintain her humanity, her marriage, her real life outside of the transaction. We don't talk about what happens when she says no. Jose Luis Rodriguez heard no and decided it was time for murder. Part 3. The Murders, a Calculated Massacre. September 11th, 2025. The husband. The first to die was Junior Cabrera Colon. Rodriguez's confession would later reveal the cold calculation behind this murder. He met with Junior in Reading. Maybe Junior thought they were friends. Maybe he knew Rodriguez was helping his wife financially and wanted to thank him. Maybe he had no idea what was coming. Rodriguez shot him in the back of the head, execution style. The kind of kill that speaks to premeditation, to planning, to a man who had decided that Junior Cabrera Colon was an obstacle that needed to be removed. Rodriguez would later claim self-defense, that Junior had pulled a gun on him, that he wrestled it away, that he fired in fear for his life. But the physical evidence told a different story. A shot to the back of the head isn't self-defense, it's assassination. Rodriguez dumped Junior's body along River Road in Bear Park, leaving him like trash among the trees and overgrown grass of Reading's forgotten spaces. Junior Cabrera Colon, 33 years old, father of 4, husband, immigrant, dreamer, reduced to a body in a park, waiting to be found. September 12th, 2025. The mother. The next day, Rodriguez picked up Geraldina and baby Jeyden. Surveillance footage would later capture this moment. Geraldina getting into Rodriguez's vehicle on North 5th Street, her baby in her arms. No idea that she was climbing into her own coffin. Maybe she thought it was a normal visit. Maybe Rodriguez had called her, told her he needed to see her, told her to bring the baby. Maybe she went willingly, still believing that this arrangement could be managed, that she could take his money and keep her marriage and somehow navigate the impossible tightrope she'd been walking. Or maybe she knew. Maybe she felt it in her gut, that primal warning system that women learn to trust. Maybe she hesitated before getting in that car. Maybe she held Jeyden a little tighter. Rodriguez drove them to Ontelaunee Township, a rural area several miles outside Reading. Quiet, isolated, the kind of place where screams don't carry. According to Rodriguez's confession, he confronted Geraldina. He demanded that she leave her husband. He told her that after everything he'd done for her, the apartment, the money, the support, she owed him. She belonged to him. Geraldina refused. She was holding her baby when Rodriguez shot her in the back of the head. The same execution-style kill, the same cold calculation. Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, 31 years old, mother of 4, died instantly. Her last conscious thought probably of the baby in her arms, the baby who was about to be orphaned, the baby who was still alive. The baby, the most horrific detail. This is where the story becomes almost unbearable. This is where District Attorney John Adams's voice would crack during the press conference. This is where even hardened investigators had to step away and collect themselves. After shooting Geraldina, Rodriguez was left with a problem. A 1-year-old baby, alive, probably crying, definitely a witness even if he was too young to testify. Rodriguez could have done many things at that moment. He could have left the baby with his dead mother and driven away. He could have dropped him at a hospital, a fire station, anywhere. He could have shown even a shred of humanity. Instead, Jose Luis Rodriguez picked up Jeyden Jr. Peguero, carried him to a nearby shallow pond, and threw him face down into the muddy water. Then he walked away. The autopsy would later confirm what investigators suspected. Jeyden was alive when he hit the water. The mud in his lungs proved it. He inhaled, he struggled, he drowned. A 1-year-old baby, thrown into a pond like garbage, left to drown in mud and shallow water while his mother's body lay nearby and his father's body cooled in a park miles away. The defendant confirmed that Jeyden was alive when he threw him face down into the muddy water. District Attorney Adams would later tell the press, his voice heavy with the weight of that sentence. Part 4. The investigation, unraveling the horror. The discovery. September 13th, 2025, 6:30 a.m., Junior Cabrera Colin's body is discovered in Bear Park. Reading police launch a homicide investigation. But something doesn't add up. Junior lived with a woman, Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, and they had a 1-year-old baby, Jeyden. Where are they? Pennsylvania State Police launched a missing persons investigation. Geraldina and Jeyden are nowhere to be found. Their apartment is empty. No one has seen them since September 12th. The investigation moves quickly. Detectives canvass the neighborhood, pull surveillance footage, and interview witnesses. They discover that Junior knew a man named Jose Luis Rodriguez, that Rodriguez had some kind of relationship with Geraldina, that Rodriguez had been seen with the family. On September 18th, 5 days after Junior's body was found, investigators brought Rodriguez in for questioning. The confession. Jose Luis Rodriguez confessed. Not to everything at first, just to killing Junior Cabrera Colin. He spun a story about self-defense, about Junior pulling a gun, about fear for his life. But the physical evidence didn't support his claims. Meanwhile, the search for Geraldina and Jeyden intensified. If Rodriguez killed Junior, where were the mother and baby? September 19th, 2025, 8:15 p.m., Geraldina's body is found in a grassy area along East Huller Lane in Ontelaunee Township, several miles outside Reading. She's been dead for a week. September 20th, 2025. Jeyden's body is discovered nearby, about 150 yards from his mother. The tiny body in the shallow pond, the mud in his lungs telling the story of his final moments. Confronted with the discovery of the bodies, Rodriguez confessed to everything. He admitted he was infuriated because Geraldina was taking his money. He admitted he shot her in the back of the head while she was holding Jeyden. He admitted he threw the baby into the pond while the child was still alive. The defendant indicated to detectives that he was infuriated because he said that Geraldina was taking his money, and he admitted that he shot Geraldina in the back of the head, District Attorney Adams revealed. Taking his money, as if she had stolen from him, as if the financial support he provided wasn't a choice he made but a debt she owed, as if her life, her body, her choices were commodities he had purchased. This is the language of ownership. This is what happens when men believe women are property. Part 5. The aftermath. 3 orphans and a community in mourning. The family left behind. Geraldina and Junior's 3 other children, ages 8 to 13, were in the Dominican Republic when their parents were murdered. They were in school, being raised by extended family, waiting for the money their parents sent from America. Now they're orphans. They took the person that was the brightest person of our family, said Heinel Medrano Mancebo, Geraldina's cousin. My family is devastated. My auntie cannot even eat right now. My grandmother, she cannot even eat either. The family launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money to repatriate the bodies to the Dominican Republic. Because even in death, poverty follows. Even in grief, there are bills to pay. The cost of bringing your murdered loved ones home becomes another burden on a family already destroyed. 3 children will grow up without parents. They'll grow up knowing their mother was murdered by a man who believed he owned her. They'll grow up knowing their father was killed because he stood in the way of that ownership. They'll grow up knowing their baby brother drowned in mud because a 61-year-old man couldn't handle rejection. The community response. Reading's Dominican community rallied around the family. Memorials appeared at Bear Park where Junior's body was found. Candles, flowers, photos of the family smiling in happier times. "This was the devil's work. This is not normal," one relative told reporters. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It is normal. Maybe not the specific horror of a baby drowned in Reading's Dominican community rallied around the family. Memorials appeared at Bear Park where Junior's body was found. Candles, flowers, photos of the family smiling in happier times. "This was the devil's work. This is not normal," one relative told reporters. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It is normal. Maybe not the specific horror of a baby drowning in mud, but the underlying dynamics. Those are devastatingly common. Women murdered by men who believe they own them. Women killed for saying no. Women destroyed because they dared to set boundaries with men who had power over them. Financial power, physical power, social power. In Reading, Pennsylvania, a city where nearly 30% of residents live below the poverty line, where the median household income hovers around $38,000, where immigrant families struggle to survive, Geraldina's story resonates in ways that make people uncomfortable. Because how many other women in Reading are making similar bargains right now? How many are accepting money from men they don't love, trying to keep their families afloat, walking that same impossible tightrope between survival and danger? The Dominican community knows, the immigrant community knows, the women know. They know that Geraldina wasn't stupid. She wasn't greedy. She wasn't asking for it. She was desperate, and Jose Luis Rodriguez exploited that desperation, then punished her for it. Part 6. The legal proceedings. Justice delayed. The charges. Jose Luis Rodriguez was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Junior Cabrera Colon, Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, Jeyden Jr. Peguero. Kidnapping, Geraldina and Jeyden. Abuse of corpse, all 3 victims. Criminal homicide, firearms violations, tampering with evidence. He was denied bail and remanded to Berks County Prison, where he remains as of December 2025. District Attorney John Adams made it clear that his office would be seeking the maximum penalties. "This is one of the most horrific cases I've seen in my career," Adams told reporters at a press conference, his voice thick with emotion. "The premeditation, the execution-style killings, and especially what was done to that baby, just makes me want to cry." Adams revealed that Rodriguez had confessed to all 3 murders, admitting that he was infuriated because Geraldina was taking his money and refused to leave her husband for him. The defense's impossible task. Rodriguez's defense attorney faces an uphill battle. The confession is damning. The physical evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy results on baby Jeyden, the mud in his lungs proving he was alive when thrown into the water, eliminate any possibility of arguing the baby's death was accidental or merciful. Rodriguez initially tried to claim self-defense in Junior's killing, saying Junior had pulled a gun on him. But the execution-style shot to the back of the head contradicts that narrative. You don't shoot someone in the back of the head while defending yourself. As of late 2025, Rodriguez remains in Berks County Prison awaiting trial. The legal process moves slowly, but the outcome seems inevitable. Pennsylvania is not a death penalty state in practice. The state has had a moratorium on execution since 2015. But Rodriguez faces 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The preliminary hearing. At Rodriguez's preliminary hearing in October 2025, Magisterial District Judge Andrea Book heard testimony from investigators detailing the timeline of the murders, the discovery of the bodies, and Rodriguez's confession. The courtroom was packed with family members, community supporters, and media. When prosecutors described how Jeyden was thrown into the pond while still alive, audible gasps and sobs filled the room. Judge Book ordered Rodriguez held without bail on all charges, calling the crimes among the most heinous she had encountered in her years on the bench. Rodriguez showed little emotion during the hearing, sitting quietly in his orange prison jumpsuit, occasionally conferring with his attorney. Family members of the victims stared at him with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "How could he?" Geraldina's cousin whispered to reporters outside the courtroom. "How could anyone do that to a baby?" Part 7. The setting. Reading, Pennsylvania and the geography of desperation. A city in decline. To understand this story, you have to understand Reading, Pennsylvania. Once a thriving industrial city, Reading has spent the last 50 years in economic decline. The factories that once employed thousands have closed or moved overseas. The railroad industry that made Reading a hub has diminished. What's left is a city struggling with poverty, crime, and the kind of desperation that makes people do things they never thought they'd do. Reading has been ranked as one of the poorest cities in America. Nearly 1 in 3 residents lives below the poverty line. The median household income is roughly half the national average. Unemployment runs high. Opportunities run low. For immigrant communities, particularly Latino immigrants from the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Mexico, Reading represents both hope and hardship. It's close enough to major cities like Philadelphia and New York to feel connected to opportunity. It's affordable enough that families can find housing. But it's also a place where making ends meet requires sacrifice, hustle, and sometimes dangerous compromises. The geography of murder. The 3 locations where bodies were found tell their own story about Reading's landscape of Bear Park, Junior's body. Located along River Road, Bear Park is one of Reading's public green spaces, but it's also isolated, poorly maintained, and the kind of place where bodies can be dumped without immediate discovery. The park sits near the Schuylkill River, in an area that sees little foot traffic, especially at night. It's the kind of place where the city's decline is visible in overgrown grass, broken playground equipment, and the sense that this space has been forgotten. North 5th Street, last seen alive. This is where surveillance cameras captured Geraldina getting into Rodriguez's vehicle with baby Jeyden on September 12th. North 5th Street runs through one of Reading's predominantly Latino neighborhoods. Blocks of row houses, small businesses with signs in Spanish, bodegas, and the everyday life of working-class immigrant families. This is where Geraldina lived her public life, where neighbors knew her, where she was just another young mother trying to make it. Ontelaunee Township, Geraldina and Jeyden's bodies. Several miles outside Reading proper, Ontelaunee Township is rural Pennsylvania, farms, woods, isolated roads, and the kind of privacy that makes it perfect for murder. East Huller Lane, where the bodies were found, is a quiet country road surrounded by fields and forest. The shallow pond where Jeyden drowned is the kind of place kids might play on a summer day, catching frogs and skipping stones. Instead, it became a baby's grave. The distance between these locations, from the urban core of Reading to the rural outskirts, mirrors the distance between Geraldina's 2 lives. Her public life in the city, with her husband and baby, her secret life in the apartment Rodriguez rented, in the transactional relationship she kept hidden. Rodriguez used Reading's geography to his advantage. He killed Junior in the city and dumped him in a park. He killed Geraldina and Jeyden in the isolated countryside, where screams wouldn't carry and bodies might not be found for days or weeks. It was calculated. It was planned. It was the work of a man who had thought through every step. Part 8. The sugar daddy culture, when survival becomes a transaction. The unspoken economy. Let's talk about what nobody wants to talk about. The economy of sugar daddy relationships, and how poverty makes women vulnerable to predatory men. Geraldina Peguero Mancebo was not a sex worker. She was not an escort. She was a wife, a mother, A woman working a warehouse job trying to support 4 children, 3 in the Dominican Republic, 1 in America. But somewhere along the way, she made a calculation that millions of women make every day. She accepted financial help from a man who wanted something in return. We don't know exactly what Rodriguez expected or what Geraldina provided. The investigation describes their relationship as personal, with unclear nature. But we know he rented her an apartment. We know he gave her money. We know he believed he had rights to her, rights that included demanding she leave her husband. This is the reality of sugar daddy culture that Instagram influencers and sugar baby lifestyle blogs don't show you. Behind the designer bags and luxury vacations is a power dynamic built on desperation and exploitation. The poverty pipeline. Here's how it works. A woman is struggling financially. Maybe she's working minimum wage. Maybe she's supporting family back home. Maybe she's one emergency away from homelessness. She's exhausted, scared, and running out of options. An older man with money notices her. He offers help, dinner, rent money, bills paid. No strings attached, he says. I just want to help. At first, maybe it really is just help. But slowly, the strings appear. He wants more time, more attention, more access to her life. The help becomes leverage. The generosity becomes debt. And when she tries to set boundaries, when she says, I have a husband, or I can't do this anymore, or simply no, the man who positioned himself as her savior reveals himself as her captor. This is what happened to Geraldina. Rodriguez positioned himself as a benefactor, but he was really a predator. He used her financial desperation to gain access to her life, then became enraged when she wouldn't give him everything he believed he'd purchased. The victim-blaming trap. Here's where the conversation usually goes wrong. Someone will say, well, she shouldn't have taken his money. She was cheating on her husband. She knew what she was getting into. This is victim-blaming, and it's exactly what allows men like Rodriguez to operate. Yes, Geraldina made choices. Yes, she accepted money from Rodriguez. Yes, she kept it secret from her husband. But none of that justifies murder. None of that means she deserved to be shot in the back of the head. None of that means her baby deserved to drown in mud. The power imbalance in sugar daddy relationships is real. When a 61-year-old man with resources targets a 31-year-old woman in poverty, that's not a relationship between equals. That's exploitation. When that man believes his money buys him ownership of her body, her choices, her future, that's not generosity, that's control. And when that man murders her for refusing to leave her husband, that's not a crime of passion. That's femicide. That's what happens when men view women as property. The broader pattern. Geraldina's story is not unique. Women are murdered by intimate partners and former partners at alarming rates. In the United States, approximately 3 women are killed by intimate partners every day. But sugar daddy relationships add to another layer of danger. Financial dependency creates additional barriers to leaving. Secrecy creates isolation. The transactional nature of the relationship dehumanizes the woman, making it easier for the man to justify violence when she doesn't comply with his expectations. Research shows that financial abuse is one of the strongest predictors of intimate partner violence. When men use money to control women, that control often escalates to physical violence. Rodriguez's rage at Geraldina taking his money reveals this mindset perfectly. He didn't see the money as gifts or even as payment for services. He saw it as an investment in ownership. When Geraldina refused to deliver what he believed he'd purchased, he felt justified in taking everything from her. Her life, her husband's life, her baby's life. Part 9. The message, no tears for Black girls. Why this story matters. This is a no tears for Black girls story because it's about a woman of color navigating systems that were never designed to protect her. Geraldina was Dominican, an immigrant, working class, struggling in a city with limited resources and opportunities. When she needed help, there was no safety net, no affordable childcare, no living wage, no way to support 4 children on a warehouse salary. So she made a choice that seemed like survival. She accepted help from a man who offered it, and that choice killed her. This is what happens when we don't support women, when we don't pay living wages, when we don't provide affordable housing, childcare, healthcare, when we force women to choose between poverty and dangerous compromises. Geraldina shouldn't have had to make that choice. She should have been able to support her family without accepting money from a predatory man. She should have had options that didn't include becoming financially dependent on someone who viewed her as property. The 3 orphans. Somewhere in the Dominican Republic, 3 children are growing up without parents. They're being raised by extended family, trying to process a trauma that no child should have to understand. Their mother was murdered. Their father was murdered. Their baby brother was drowned. And why? Because their mother tried to survive. Because she accepted money from a man who believed that money bought him ownership. Because she dared to say no. These 3 children are the living legacy of this tragedy. They're also a reminder of what's at stake when we don't address the systemic issues that make women vulnerable to predatory men. The baby in the mud. But it's Jeyden's death that haunts this story. It's the detail that made District Attorney John Adams want to cry. It's the image that will stay with investigators for the rest of their careers. A 1-year-old baby thrown face down into muddy water, alive, struggling, drowning. Jeyden didn't make any choices. He didn't accept money from anyone. He didn't have a secret relationship. He was just a baby, held in his mother's arms, present at the wrong moment. And Jose Luis Rodriguez threw him away like garbage. This is what male entitlement looks like at its most extreme. Rodriguez was so consumed by rage at Geraldina's refusal, so convinced of his right to own her, that he murdered an innocent baby just to complete his revenge. Jeyden's death is the ultimate proof that this wasn't about love or passion or even jealousy in any romantic sense. This was about power, about a man who couldn't accept that a woman he'd financially supported still had the right to say no. Part 10, the latest updates and current status, where the case stands now. As of December 2025, Jose Luis Rodriguez remains in Berks County Prison, awaiting trial. His case is moving through the Pennsylvania court system, with a trial date expected to be set in early 2026. The Berks County District Attorney's Office has made it clear they will seek the maximum penalties available under Pennsylvania law. While Pennsylvania maintains a moratorium on the death penalty, Rodriguez faces 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole if convicted on all counts. Legal experts say the case is open and shut. Rodriguez's confession, combined with physical evidence, surveillance footage, and autopsy results, creates an overwhelming case for the prosecution. The defense's only real strategy may be to negotiate a plea deal that avoids trial, sparing the family from having to relive the horror in court. The family's ongoing struggle. The GoFundMe campaign to repatriate the bodies to the Dominican Republic successfully raised enough money to bring Junior, Geraldina, and Jeyden home. The family held funeral services in the Dominican Republic, where the 3 were buried together. But the financial struggle continues. The 3 surviving children need ongoing support. Extended family members who have taken them in are now responsible for raising them, feeding them, educating them, all while processing their own grief and trauma. The family has also expressed frustration with the pace of the legal system. "We want justice," Geraldina's cousin told reporters. "But justice moves so slowly, and every day we wait is another day those children are without answers." Community impact. In Redding's Dominican community, Geraldina's story has sparked difficult conversations about financial desperation, secret relationships, and the dangers women face when they accept help from men with ulterior motives. Some community members have organized support groups for women in similar situations. Women who are struggling financially, who may be in relationships with men who provide financial support, who need resources and exit strategies. Local domestic violence organizations have reported an increase in calls from women seeking help. Geraldina's story has prompted some women to recognize dangerous patterns in their own relationships and reach out for support before it's too late. Media coverage. The case has received significant media attention, both locally and nationally. The horrific details, particularly Jeyden's death, have made it a story that captures public attention and outrage. But some coverage has been problematic, focusing on sensational details while ignoring the systemic issues that made Geraldina vulnerable. Headlines like "Sugar Daddy Kills Family" reduce a complex story of poverty, desperation, and male violence to a salacious tagline. This is why platforms like No Tears for Black Girls are so important. We tell these stories with context. We center the victim's humanity. We ask the hard questions about why women like Geraldina end up in these situations in the first place. Calls for systemic change. Advocates are using Geraldina's story to push for policy changes. Living wages. If Geraldina had been able to support her family on her warehouse salary, she wouldn't have needed Rodriguez's money. Poverty wages force women into dangerous compromises. Affordable housing. The housing crisis in cities like Reading means families can't afford rent on legitimate incomes, making them vulnerable to predators who offer to pay their bills. Immigration support services. Immigrant families need access to resources, financial literacy programs, and community support that doesn't leave them isolated and vulnerable. Financial abuse education. Recognizing financial abuse as a form of domestic violence and providing resources for women trapped in financially controlling relationships. Stronger enforcement of stalking and harassment laws. Rodriguez's escalating behavior showed warning signs before the murders. Better intervention could potentially save lives. Epilogue. The cost of survival, what Geraldina paid. Geraldina Peguero Mancebo made a choice that millions of women make every day. She accepted help from a man who offered it. She tried to keep her family afloat in a system designed to let people like her drown. She paid for that choice with her life. Her husband paid with his life. Her baby paid with his life. Her 3 surviving children paid with their childhood, their innocence, their parents. And Jose Luis Rodriguez? He sits in a prison cell, waiting for trial, having destroyed an entire family because a woman dared to tell him no, the uncomfortable truth. Here's what we need to understand. Geraldina's story is playing out right now in cities across America. Women are making impossible choices between poverty and dangerous compromises. They're accepting money from men who view them as property. They're walking tightropes between survival and destruction. Some of them will make it across. Some of them won't. The ones who don't make it become statistics. They become headlines. They become cautionary tales that other women read and think, that won't happen to me. I'm smarter. I'm more careful. I can handle it. But Geraldina thought the same thing. She believed she could take Rodriguez's money and maintain her boundaries. She thought she was in control. Until the moment she realized she wasn't. The baby's last moments. Let's end where we began, with Jeyden Jr. Peguero, 1-year-old, thrown face down into muddy water. In his last moments, Jeyden didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand why the world had suddenly become cold and wet and dark. He didn't understand why he couldn't breathe. He didn't understand why his mother wasn't saving him. He just knew terror. He just knew the instinctive, desperate fight for air that every drowning victim experiences. He just knew that something was very, very wrong. And then he knew nothing at all. The mud filled his lungs. The water took him. And Jose Luis Rodriguez walked away, leaving a baby's body floating in a shallow pond like it was nothing. Like Jeyden's life meant nothing. Like the only thing that mattered was Rodriguez's wounded pride and his rage at a woman who refused to be owned. The message. This is what happens when men view women as property. This is what happens when poverty forces women into dangerous compromises. This is what happens when financial desperation meets male entitlement. This is what happens when a woman's no is treated as a crime punishable by death. Geraldina Peguero Mancebo was not perfect. She made choices that some will judge. But she didn't deserve to die. Junior didn't deserve to die. And Jeyden, innocent, helpless, 1-year-old Jeyden, certainly didn't deserve to drown in mud while his killer walked away. No tears for Black girls. We tell these stories because someone has to. We tell them with context, with compassion, with an understanding of the systems that fail women of color every single day. We tell them because Geraldina's name deserves to be remembered as more than just a victim. She was a mother, a wife, a woman trying to survive in a world that gave her impossible choices. We tell them because Junior's name deserves to be remembered as more than just collateral damage. He was a father, a husband, a man building a life in America. We tell them because Jeyden's name deserves to be remembered as more than just the most horrific detail in a murder case. He was a baby with his whole life ahead of him, stolen before he could even speak his first words. We tell these stories because silence protects predators. Silence allows men like Jose Luis Rodriguez to operate. Silence lets the systems that failed Geraldina continue failing other women. We tell these stories because Black and brown women's lives matter. Because immigrant women's lives matter. Because poor women's lives matter. We tell these stories because there should be tears for Black girls, for Dominican girls, for every woman who makes an impossible choice and pays the ultimate price. The 3 orphans. Somewhere in the Dominican Republic tonight, 3 children are going to bed without their parents. They're being tucked in by aunts and grandmothers and cousins who are doing their best, but who can never replace what was stolen. Those children will grow up with questions. They'll want to know why. They'll want to understand how their mother's choice to accept help from a man led to the destruction of their entire family. And someday, someone will have to tell them the truth, that their mother was trying to survive, that she was trying to give them a better life, that she made a choice that seemed like the only option available to her, and that a man who believed he owned her decided that if he couldn't have her, no one would. Those 3 children are the living legacy of this tragedy. They're also a reminder of what's at stake every time we ignore the systemic issues that make women vulnerable. Every time we blame victims instead of predators. Every time we look away from uncomfortable truths about poverty, power, and male violence. Justice delayed. Jose Luis Rodriguez will eventually face trial. He'll likely be convicted. He'll probably spend the rest of his life in prison. But that's not justice. Not really. Justice would be Geraldina alive, raising her 4 children, free from financial desperation. Justice would be Junior alive, working, building his American dream. Justice would be Jeyden alive, taking his first steps, saying his first words, growing up. Justice would be a world where women don't have to choose between poverty and predatory men. Justice would be a world where a woman's no is respected, not punished with death. Justice would be a world where babies don't drown in mud because a man's ego was wounded. We don't live in that world. We live in this one, where Geraldina is dead, Junior is dead, Jeyden is dead, and 3 children are orphans. All because a 61-year-old man believed his money bought him ownership of a 31-year-old woman's life. All because male entitlement met financial desperation and created a perfect storm of violence. All because we live in a world that fails women of color over and over and over again. The final word. This is the story of Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, Junior Cabrera Colon, and Jeyden Jr. Peguero. This is the story of what happens when survival becomes a transaction. This is the story of the true cost of sugar daddy culture. This is the story of 3 lives stolen, 3 bodies in 3 locations, and one man's belief that he had the right to destroy an entire family. This is a no tears for Black girls story. But there should be tears. There should be rage. There should be a commitment to changing the systems that made Geraldina vulnerable in the first place. Because somewhere right now, another woman is making the same impossible choice Geraldina made. Another woman is accepting money from a man who views her as property. Another woman is walking the same tightrope between survival and destruction. And we have to ask ourselves, will we let her story end the same way? Or will we finally do something to change the world that creates these tragedies in the first place? Rest in power, Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, 31 years old. Rest in power, Junior Cabrera Colon, 33 years old. Rest in power, Jeyden Jr. Peguero, 1 year old. Your lives mattered. Your stories matter. And we will not let the world forget what was done to you. Author's note. This story is based on the real murders of Geraldina Peguero Mancebo, Junior Cabrera Colon, and Jeyden Jr. Peguero in Reading, Pennsylvania in September 2025. Jose Luis Rodriguez has been charged with their murders and awaits trial as of December 2025. The details of the sugar daddy relationship, the financial arrangement, and the specific dynamics between Rodriguez and Geraldina have been reconstructed from police reports, court documents, and media coverage. While some narrative elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, all major facts, including the timeline of murders, the methods used, the discovery of bodies, Rodriguez's confession, and the autopsy finding of mud in baby Jeyden's lungs, are based on official investigative findings. This story is told to honor the victims, to provide context for the systemic issues that made Geraldina vulnerable, and to spark conversation about the dangers of sugar daddy culture, financial abuse, and male violence against women. If you or someone you know is in a financially controlling or abusive relationship, please reach out for help. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-4673. Financial Abuse Resources, www.nnedv.org/content/about-financial-abuse. For the No Tears for Black Girls podcast, this is a story we tell because silence protects predators. We tell it because Black and brown women's lives matter. We tell it because there should be tears and action for every woman whose survival choices lead to tragedy. Stay loved, stay blessed, and stay safe. This is Samantha Paul. Up next is Truth Teller, a song from the upcoming No Tears for Black Girls soundtrack featuring Jada Truth, a character from Dead Mike, the next novel in the No Tears for Black Girls universe. Both the book and soundtrack drop this Halloween. Until next time, hopefully I'll see you there.
They always ask me, do you regret it? Regret telling the truth? Never. Mama wasn't there when I needed her most. Left me searching for love, chasing ghosts. 15 years old, looking for a home in the arms of a man who should've left me alone. Should've known better. He saw my hunger, fed my desperate needs. Promised me safety while he planted his seed of dependency wrapped in false care. While my family acted like they weren't aware. They knew, but I learned to play the game he taught. Learn quick. Turn his lessons into what I saw. Flipped it. Money in my pocket, power in my hand. Even when I didn't understand. Truth teller, that's what I became. When I exposed the lies, destroyed his game. Truth teller, I found my power. In that moment of truth, my finest hour. He thought he was slick, thought he had control. But I was learning how to save my soul. Every dollar that he gave to me, everyone was buying back my future, set me free. My freedom. I watch him light up face every night. Knowing I had the power to make it right. Or make it wrong depending how you see. The reckoning that was building inside of me. the door with my head held high. Told her everything, didn't sugarcoat a lie. About her husband and what he done. How he stole my childhood, thought he'd won. Told her I was 15, watched her face fall. Watched his kingdom crumble, watched it all of it. And I won't lie, I enjoyed the show. Watching him reap what he chose to sow. Justice served cold on a silver plate. Sometimes the truth just cannot wait. His world in ashes, mine set free. That's what speaking truth did for me. Truth teller, that's what I became. When I exposed lies, God is grace. Truth teller, I found my power. Never want you to find a star. Never want you to find a star. Never want you to find a star. Now I speak truth wherever I go. Cause lies and secrets only help people grow. Some call me ruthless, some call me cold. Call me what you want, but my story needed to be told. Oh, and by the way, it was my aunt's husband. The man at every family dinner. The one they all trusted. They trusted him. Family don't always mean family. But truth will set you free.